naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye narayana namaskritya
Yam Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayati
Om Namo Bhāgavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhāgavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhāgavate Vasudevaya.
Matthew, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Next time feel free to, go for as long as you want. And if you'd like to do that on the guitar, I mean, the harmonium is a new introduction to, it's not like Vedic. The harmonium was introduced in India in the Victorian period. It was an Indian kind of rendition of the Christian organ. So there's absolutely no reason why you look like you have 108 guitars in your closet over there. So I'm sure you can find one that works for the kirtan. But feel free, that would be lovely as well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, my friends. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Akanda Mandalakaram Yena Vyaptam Characharam Tat Padam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Apavitra Pavitrova Sarvavastha Gatopi Va Yasmaret Pundarikaksham Sa Bhayabhyantara Shachi. Okay, my friends, so I'm so grateful to you all for your interest in the Bhagavatam, especially now I'm retiring. I'm not sure what else to do. In terms of the principal focus of the mind at this point now, all of the sort of grand ambitions and activities of being an academic and writing books and teaching. And I was fortunate at least that I managed to find a way of construing all that as my service to Bhagavan. So all of my courses were in some form or fashion connected to Bhakti and Sri Bhagavan, and even Hindu philosophy always ended with passages from the Bhagavatam. But that's all coming now to an end. And so it'd be great, if you give me a little bit of time to go just right through this choppy period in the next few months and step out of this box. I've got, it's going to take a little. I'm going to need to retreat and reflect, and been trapped in the asmita of being a professor. That's just another kind of asmita in that decade. So that's going to take a little work to shake all that off and just become a humble bhakta And I hope to then, really read, really work with this, spend the rest of my life with this Bhagavatam, really thinking about it deeply, trying to understand the structure, the sequence of the chapters, really how are we being prepared in the first nine, it's 18,000 verses, and a quarter of those are the 10th book. But the Krishna story is in the 10th book, so there's a logic behind the first nine books in terms of preparing us to encounter, God on high, the supreme causal being, who in most theistic traditions, the Abrahamic traditions, is so majestic. In the Old Testament, most of the prophets, mostly it says you can't see God, you can't see God. Occasionally it says, well, if you did see God, you would instantly die because of the overwhelmingness. And then there are one or two prophets who actually do see God, like Ezekiel. And you have that passage in the Old Testament with Ezekiel, and God Yahweh's on the throne, and it's this different beasts as the wheels of the throne, and it's very overwhelmingly majestic. So that God on high, that's represented that way. And in the Indian tradition, we have that with Narayana. There's stories in the Mahabharata where most sages go to see Narayana on the White Island, Shwetadweep, but most sages can't even see him. And other sages are there, and they're wondering what all these other sages are seeing. So we have this sort of motif of God on high for those traditions that accept God. And then in the Krishna tradition, we have that God on high crawling around in the dust of Vrindavan. And he has bruised knees because he's trying to pull himself up and he falls and bruises his knees. Now, what kind of a God on high is that? One might, if the Bhagavatam began like that, you'd just be, well, okay, I mean, I don't know how many people would keep going, but it would just be utterly puzzling. And so the Bhagavatam has these nine books. It would be bewildering. Anyone who continued reading would just think it was a cute fairy story or a fable. Then they would just, okay, well, let's, some quaint, sort of mythological, primordial story from the Hindus. So in order to prepare ourselves for that, we have these nine books. So I really hope to sort of think very, very carefully about what's going on in those nine books. But I promised you that, so we're bouncing around a bit, at least until I retire, and then I have to think, do we want to do a systematic study? But that will take many years, and that's fine with me. Or do we want to keep bouncing around? But for now, we're bouncing around, but I did promise that we would occasionally bounce into the 10th book, especially since Eleonora will chastise me if we don't, right, Eleonora? Because I did promise. So we're going to now take an excursion. We were in the Kapila story with Queen Kunti, and we're just going to dab off our big toes into the 10th book and have a quick glimpse at Krishna's birth. And then we'll go back and do more jnana, right? Most of the books a lot of the first nine books are jnana. Is everybody clear about the difference between jnana yoga and bhakti yoga? So jnana yoga are those traditions that just to summarize again, the ultimate goal of which is your own Atman. And those are the traditions that talk about temporality, and the world is temporal, and death is imminent, and don't waste your time. And desire is the cause of reincarnation. Desire breeds reaction. Reaction generates future births, and desire is never satisfied. And rise above sukha dukkha. All of that kind of rhetoric comes under the rubric of jnana. Okay, so you have Jnana Yoga, and Dhyana with the DH is when you just still all of that. And that's especially associated, at least in terms of the formalized version of that, is in the Patanjali, and scattered throughout the Bhagavatam. And by the way, I'm going to embarrass our friend Peter Donahue, who is up there, who is I believe, a professor of correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, of creative writing, and he sent me this book on Patanjali. because no one knows anything about Patanjali. We don't know anything about him. People speculate he's from the Northwest. We don't actually know anything like that. The tradition says there were three Patanjalis, one associated with one, that we do have a Patanjali that wrote a grammar on Panini, and I'm not sure, Peter, we have to maybe have a little chat about that, because you haven't worked that in. Maybe you have a reason for not working that in. But, or at least I'm only on page 145. But I just wanted to say, Peter has written an amazing, not a fictional, historical fiction about Patanjali's life. So it's fiction because we don't know anything, but it's so full of accurate detail about the the Vedic cultural context at the time. He's got just this. I mean, he's an expert writer. I mean, just from a literary point of view, in terms of metaphors and allegories, which is something I don't know enough about, and I'm now intrigued to enter that world more deeply, especially the Sanskrit world of Kavya. But just the psychology, the conversations, it's kind of like I've been spending 45 years studying the Shastras in a rather dry, well, I would say dry, but let's say not in a very literary, embellished sort of way. And it's such a pleasure to read. This is the first, Peter, this is the first time I've read fiction in 45 years. That's how much of a nerd I am. I mean, that's just that is shocking when you actually sit down and just say it like that. And this is what a fantastic entree back into the world of good literature. So I'm just want to put a plug out there. I've never done this in my Svādhyāya. I put a plug out for anybody. But Peter Donohue's book, what's it called, Peter?
Hatha Yoga.
Utter Yoga, right? The first two lines of the Yoga Sutra, Utter Yoga. And it's just remarkable. I still have 100 pages to go. And how it even enters, he was a Gurukul, he went to Gurukul school, and how like yoga was kind of neglected in the kind of traditional learning systems because it wasn't considered to be philosophical. That much I'm up to that much at least, and how Patanjali always has this fascination with it, and presumably the last 100 pages he's going to then be inspired to write the book. But I really want to put a plug out for it because it's so yoga if yoga is going to spread through the West, which it is, and yoga philosophy, it's going to take many forms. It's not just going to be the study of the dry, archaic Yoga Sutras. It's going to infiltrate art and aesthetics and literature. And as long as it's, in my opinion, as long as it's actually grounded in and not just totally making up philosophy and new ageizing the philosophy and watering down the philosophy, as long as it's true to the philosophy, it's a wonderful thing that it takes all of these different formats. So keep an eye out for that book, and
Well,
I just highly recommend it. I don't know what else to say.
and if
It's
there's anyone who knows a publisher out there, let me know.
well, I was going to talk to you about that. Maybe putting, I have a couple of, we'll talk about that. Okay, my friends. So so what we'll do today then is look at Krishna's birth, at his entrance into the universe. You have to remember now in the Vaishnava tradition, this is not Brahman manifesting form. This is the eternal personal being. Okay, so Krishna there is a kingdom of God in Vaishnava theology, and there are infinite kingdoms of God because there must be the case for an infinite Godhead. So infinite forms of Vishnu, each one has their own abode. Even within Prakriti, there are infinite universes, that they're Prakritic universes, right? And there are actually physicists that postulate that there are infinite material universes, and of course, it's not ridiculed, that position. It actually is one way of thinking about the collapse of the wave function. That you don't know where it's going to collapse, but in the infinite universe model, it's collapsing somewhere in one. Anyway, I'm not a physicist, but beyond the realm of Prakriti, within the realm of Brahman, remember, I don't know if realm is the right word, but we don't have language really. but within the aspect of totality that constitutes Brahman, then Brahman is Satchit Ananda. There's no three gunas are not there. Nothing is inanimate. The gunas are inanimate. In our universe, there is Chit and Achit. There is Purusha and Prakriti. But another way of thinking of Purusha and Prakriti is Chit, that's Purusha, consciousness, and Achit. Achit, there's categorically two distinct types of substances with therefore their distinct qualities. So all the Achit, the unconscious, that have qualities like color and form and taste and all the material qualities. And Chit has the quality of Chitti Shakti, of consciousness, Chaitana and Ananda. So Krishna is coming, and so within that realm of that aspect of totality that is Brahman, there are realms, personalist realms, and God abides in those realms, just like the Christians what the Old Testament might say. It's quite close to that. The Vaishnava tradition is, in that sense, as closer to Christianity than it is to Advaita Vedanta. So in those realms, then Bhagavan, there's one particular unique to Krishna called Goloka. So everything is Satchidananda, the forms. So all of us, if we are bhaktas, we go to those realms and we get a form of Satchidananda, and that form is specifically it's specific to the kind of love we wish to have with God. If you want to be God's mother, you get a maternal kind of form. Or if you want to be a friend, you get a friend form. So just like in this realm, the forms are made by karma. So a dog is a dog by karma. You and I, whoever we are by karma, are forms. In that realm, the forms are instruments for love. In this realm, it's instruments to burn up karma and try to find bhoga, which we can never find. So all of this is background to Krishna entering into the universe. It's not Brahman, taking a form. These are eternal forms that avatara. Avatri, they cross beyond. Ava means kind of down, and tra means to cross over. So keep that in mind. So Krishna's entering the universe in an eternal form. And of course, Krishna manifests infinite forms. Like when he's dancing with the gopis, each gopi has her own form, but that's we'll look at that when we get to that Leela. Leela means like an episode of Krishna's, often translated as pastimes, because it's not so easy to translate the word Leela. Okay? So we'll look at that and today, and then we'll go back and do some more jnana. We have to do some jnana and tapas, my friends, to prepare our minds to understand God. So the mind has to be prepared, and that's what the first 9 books of the Bhagavatam do. Just like Patanjali, you got to do Kriya Yoga before you get to Samadhi. You got to do the seven limbs, and then you have a chance at Samadhi. So in bhakti, we have to work through the various processes of bhakti and so forth, and before we are eligible to understand who Bhagavan is, Bhagavan's Leela, but we will. But it's okay to just dive in and just because Bhagavan is all perfect, so even just prematurely diving into the 10th and having a quick peek is absolutely fine. In fact, it's accepted. But the Bhagavatam does say at some point, if you read through the entire thing sequentially, you will gain a seed of bhakti that can never be removed. You may have to, it may grow in the next lifetime. It's not that you're guaranteed pure prema in this life, but that seed of bhakti will be irretrievably planted in the heart. Even if you take a 10-life detour, it's irretrievable. It's different from all other samskaras, my friends, because it's Bhagavan. All other samskaras in the next life we forget. You're a good musician in this life. Where's Matthew? Matthew, you better sell those guitars before you die, my friend. Because next lifetime you won't even remember what a C chord looks like. Because right, that's the nature of prakritic sanskaras get covered over. So, but not bhakti. And it will push its way through and actually any yoga. Krishna says at the end of chapter 6, if you want to check that. He said, the next lifetime, abashopi, as if by force, that samskara, it doesn't get pushed down into the subconscious. By force it manifests, and you're automatically attracted to bhakti without having a clue what's going on. What's going on is you did the work in the previous life, but you won't know that in the next life unless you make that inference. Okay, so we will just check. We will check in with it. We'll just have a little look at a verse at Krishna's birth. Okay, and may I just say one more thing, and then we'll let the text speak for itself. And that is, as background information here, and that is that the Vedic universe, everything is animated. It's not a fact. They would just be totally puzzled as to how we come to believe that this planet is full of teeming with not infinite, but abundant life forms, right? I think scientists count 84 lakh, 8,400,000, which is interesting. The Puranas say the same number. Scientists say 8,300,000. And all of this, and only this planet and everything else out there is dead rock. They would take the position that the entire universe is animated. It's just that because of our cognitive equipment, we're not able to perceive the fact that the cosmos is full of other kinds of creatures and beings. And you've heard me say this, and you've heard me give this example many times. It would just be like the ants in our rooms, right? Because they're covered by tamas as Atman in them, in the ants, they're covered by tamas, and they're not able to see they're in a room with furniture that was manufactured in Shanghai or wherever, and part of a sort of a global network of human communities and economic systems. They have absolutely no way of understanding that, the ant. They're just to the scuttle across. Occasionally we kind of step near them and the earth shakes and they scuttle off. So we are no different from that. I mean, we are different. Relatively, our sattva is more developed than that of the ant, and we are aware of larger aspects of reality than the ant. But from the point of view of the celestial beings, and this is relevant to the story, and that's why I'm giving this preamble, our ability to comprehend the universe is like that of the ant. The ant can't even comprehend our room. What to speak of a town? What to speak of a country? What to speak of the planet? What to speak of the universe? So from that point of view, we are just a few steps ahead of the ant, but the universe is full of all kinds of beings, and some of these beings are powerful beings, and they control the sun. So we've all heard of the Surya Namaskar. Well, we're actually doing the Namaskar to the being whose body is the sun, meaning it's a celestial being who has a powerful function, and that is controlling the sun. Just like, I don't know, even in our sphere of awareness, we have powerful beings. We have senators and who control massive amounts of resources and taxes and the well-being of a state. All right, even so we know that. And in principle, we could become a senator, but and in principle, we could become a deva. Okay, so there's all kinds of devas. Again, this is relevant to the story, so bear with me and you'll see how. And they have these different forms and functions. So Surya Namaskar, and even the Gayatri Mantra, people give all these weird translations of the Gayatri Mantra, the light within. It's an invocation to the sun. Om Bhur Svaha Tat Savitor Savitri Bharenyam. Savitri is the sun, is Surya. Om Bhur the three worlds. Nothing to do with the inner consciousness. Om Bhur Svaha Tat Savitor Savitri Bharenyam Bhargo Devasya. The Devasya, genitive, the Deva Bhargo, the sun god. So why have we modernized it into like, oh, the light within? Because we don't believe in celestials anymore. The old Indo-European celestials were eradicated by, I suppose, Christianity, but then Christianity introduces a bunch of angels, so they haven't changed the sort of the notion of divine beings that much. So the universe is animated, okay? Take it or leave it. We're reading this. We do a traditional Svādhyāya, my friends. Let the texts speak for themselves. We're not interested in modernizing them. What's the point in modernizing them? But invent a new religion then, if we want to instead of modernizing it. We can make something else up. But to try to read this to the best of our abilities through the material lenses. It doesn't mean accepting or rejecting. Phenomenologically, just let's let it tell its own story. And the stories are magical, and they can't help but touch your heart. So it's an animated universe. Okay, so there's beings behind the sun, the stars, the ocean, right? The rivers, all of that. All right. With all that said, and we're don't have to give me a sec. I'm not doing too good here. I'll do this. Good. In due time, an extremely auspicious moment. All right, the Krishna's birth, 10th book. Now, in the 10th book, I mentioned that's the book that makes the Purāṇa the most famous Purāṇa by far. That's not a sectarian statement. You heard me say it before. There's been over 100 commentaries written on the Bhāgavata Purāṇa. That means 18,000 verses. 100 different people have written comments on every single one of those massive commentaries. The next Purāṇa, Vishnu, 2. And then after that, most Puranas, 0. So if we say that the Bhagavatam is the most famous, we quantify that by the number of commentaries written on it. And it's probably more than 100 by now. And why is it the most famous? Because Krishna. Where else do you find Krishna? Harivamsa, but nobody reads that. Okay. So in due time, an extremely auspicious moment endowed with all good qualities arrived. God, who creates the universe, is entering into the universe. And whatever constitutes auspiciousness is that it is going to manifest. The universe is going to manifest its most auspicious arrangement of things, including the constellations. That's what bhakti is. Bhakti is nothing other than you offer your best to Bhagavan. So if you're if you're the sort of constellations, you align yourselves, the celestial beings in charge of the constellations, or whose body is the constellations, they align themselves in that which constitutes auspiciousness, maximum auspiciousness, right? Astrologers look at your astrological chart and they say, well, this is afflicted, but that's auspicious. Okay, so we all have this sort of combination of affliction in our in our planetary houses, and we have some, hopefully, we have some auspicious situations of planets and planetary beings in various houses. Well, if God is coming, right, on occasion you can see a great being, you see these sort of, that you look at their charts and you see some kind of extraordinary arrangement. Well, how about the greatest being of all? What kind of an arrangement are the constellations going to line themselves into for Krishna? Well, an extremely auspicious moment, verse 1, endowed with all good qualities. At the time of Krishna's birth, the constellation and the stars were all favorable. The constellation was Rohini, which is presided over by Brahma. And by the way, there were some, occasionally we can throw in some academic stuff, but when the colonial scholars and Christian, when Europeans encountered Hinduism, they were saying, oh, this is all mythological, none of it's historically true. And there was an attempt made, and also, well, even anything that is true, is much later. It's not 3000 BCE. There was nothing going on in India in 3000 BCE, right? Till they found the Indus Valley civilization. Then they say, well, that's not even Sanskrit. That's not even Vedic. The Vedas came after that, blah, blah, blah. But there were scholars then, traditional pundits, because there were two types of responses to that kind of like attempt to sort of undermine or even suggest that Hindus had no history. They were mythological thinkers and they have no history. So archaeology is trying to resist that in various ways. But the traditional pundits, who have nothing to do with archaeology and linguistics, they're Sanskritists. They took references like this. The constellation was Rohini, and they attempt to go back to look at the astronomical charts to see when was Rohini in this particular alignment. They didn't have much success with this one, but with the Mahabharata, well, for example, Bhishma is lying for 60 days on the bed of arrows. They're waiting for a particular constellation, which was auspicious for leaving the body. They tried to actually date that, and some of them do date to 3108 BCE. Some of the astronomical reference, you can actually date them because of the precession of the equinoxes, right? So every 1,000 years it changes. So then if there was a particular constellation at a particular in a particular house, you can date when that would have taken place. The problem with that method, it's called astrochronology. The problem with the method was there were conflicting things in the Mahabharata. There were definitely indications of 3100 and 2 BCE, which is what the tradition said. There are references that actually indicate that. Unfortunately, there's other references that are later, and therefore the method was rejected because of inconsistency with these types of references. But it's quite fascinating and really quite an interesting attempt to defend the historicality, at least of the dates mentioned in the sacred texts. Quite ingenious, actually, but didn't quite for the reasons I just mentioned. So here we have the constellation with Rohini, and so each constellation has a deva, and it's presided by Brahma, who is we read the story of Brahma at some point early in our Svādhyāya. The directions were clear. The sky was clear, and the sky was covered with clusters of visible stars. So the sky made sure that everything was beautiful and clear, so the stars were shining maximally. Remember, there are beings behind all of these cosmic functions, and they're doing bhakti. And what is bhakti is that you offer your best for Bhagavan. That's all it is. Bhakti is whatever you have, you take the best version of that and you offer it. So if you're the deva in charge of the sky, you make sure that there's no clouds or at least that everything is clear. There's no there's not muggy. On the earth there was a happy abundance of mines, pastures, villages, and towns. So the mines, the earth offers up its jewels when Bhagavan enters. Normally you have to dig, you have these horrific, mines, and nowadays, of course, there's all slave labor and child labor and all the horror stories with mines. It's Kali Yuga, so we have to get the jewels of the earth. We have to engage in this awful kind of exploitative activity. But when Krishna comes, the earth itself, what's the best? If you're the earth, what's the best you can offer to Bhagavan? If you're the deity, Bhumi, in charge of the earth, when you open up your bowels and you offer the best of minerals. The rivers contain crystal clear water. You're a river. You make sure all the mud is settled down. There's no mud floating about, no debris, right? It's like your house. You clean it. If you have a special guest, you clean your house. You make sure everything is beautiful and tidy, like I just did for what they call staging my house for sale. You make everything in the best possible condition. So they're a river, you do that. So they contain crystal clear water, and the ponds were beautiful with lotuses. They're offering up their best inhabitants, the lotuses. Lines of trees offered eulogies with the loud sounds of bees and birds. So the bees and birds get together and they say, let's do a nice harmony. Just like musicians might get together, special guest is coming. Musicians, they practice, we have Matthew on the guitar, somebody else on flute, some special Bhagavan is coming. You want to do your best melody, but you're going to put something beautiful together. The birds and bees are doing that. They're going to do a beautiful harmony for the arrival of Sri Bhagavan, right? This is their moment that there's the skill set that they've been given by their nature. Birds are chirping, bees are buzzing, bees are always hovering around Krishna's necklace, garland anyway. They get to offer the best harmonics that their nature allows them to produce. That's bhakti. They're going to offer it to Bhagavan. With the loud sounds of bees and birds, a fresh breeze blew in the region, pleasing the senses and bearing pleasant scents. So you're the breeze. You make sure the temperature is going to be perfect, little cooling but not cold, right? And you're going to make sure that you're going to go over the jasmine flowers so that you carry the scent of the jasmine flowers. You figure out what is the best offering, best temperature, what the best sense that you can carry to welcome Sri Bhagavan into the universe. And the sacred fires of the Brahmanas blazed forth undisturbed, right? So the Brahmanas are doing their best. What's their best? They're trained since certain types of Brahmanas, different kinds. But the yajna, in fact, all Brahmanas of the ancient period did fire sacrifices. So you're doing it to your best. You're going to chant those Vedic hymns so beautifully and precisely. Purohitam, and you're going to do it in your best voice, and the wind is not going to disturb the fires, right? The fires of the Brahmanas blazed undisturbed, so the wind says, okay, I'm not going to blow, we don't want any smoke, we just want the beautiful flames arising from the fires with the mantras of the Brahmanas. They're doing their best chants. Bees are going to do their best buzzing in harmony with the birds doing their best cheeping. All creation is welcoming Bhagavan to the best according to their natures as embodied beings. And this is the perfection of bhakti. Whatever birth they've taken, remember, to be a bee or a bird, when Bhagavan, don't think these are random bees and birds. You think you can just be a random bee and a bird and Bhagavan's going to enter the universe? No. Those bees have been amazing bhaktas in past life that they get to buzz for Bhagavan's pleasure when he enters. And the birds, don't think they're random birds. So finally, here's their moment. And they're going to offer their best, which they've been practicing. They've been practicing in different forms in past lives, offering their best. And finally, they get to the 100% point. No, 100% means no personal desire anymore. Mind is exclusively fixed on Bhagavan. And now they take their various births, some as bees, some as birds, some as monkeys, some as gopas, some as gopis, the very, very highest level bhaktas take more human form of births, but they're all infinitely blessed at this point. And now, up in the celestial realms, the minds of the ascetics and the celestials were peaceful, right? You're doing Patanjali yoga, Chittavritti Nirodha. That's your thing. So you make your mind the most peaceful to welcome Bhagavan. You're offering that's your dharma, right? In that particular moment of your infinite births, you're doing Patanjali and yoga. So you do that to the best of your ability. Celestials were peaceful. Kettle drums resounded, right, in the celestial realms. In unison, all the celestial beings are getting together to perform an orchestra. At the moment of birth of the unborn one, The Bhagavatam loves these oxymorons. Krishna is unborn, is infinite eternal being, residing in his Brahman abode of Goloka, the kingdom of God. So he's unborn, but when he enters the universe, it appears to be born. So the birth of the unborn one. And now the various types of celestial beings. You've got Kinnaras, which are kind of dancers and musicians. Gandharvas are also musicians, and they're also warrior gods, a bit like Saint Michael, who is an angel, but a warrior angel. Excuse me, Gandharvas took part in the Mahabharata war. They captured Arjuna. They captured Karna at a certain point. Anyway, but they're angelic beings. All of these great Vaishnavas, they're all Vaishnavas, and they sang. You can imagine what the celestial singing is like. It's something actually Christian. The Christians have really developed in a marvelous way. For me, that's angelic. Some of those beautiful Gregorian chants and other kinds of Christians, they really sort of worked that over the centuries. A tradition of glorifying God through organ music and orchestral music in their own way, as have the Hindus with their various types of instrumentation. So whatever marvelous, we know something about the marvels of Christian music and raga, Indian music. Imagine how much more marvelous the celestial music is, and that's still within Prakriti. We're not even talking about what the sounds of Brahman, the Brahman realms must be. So the siddhas and chadanas offered prayers at all the celestial beings, and the vidyadharas joyfully danced with the apsaras, the females, ladies, they're dancers, celestial, that sometimes called nymphs, but I'm not sure. I think we need to be careful about importing terms from Greek epic. The nymphs in the Greek tradition may overlap partially, but not fully with apsaras. So we're at the stage now we should be using Indic terms. We do not need to borrow terms from the Greco-Roman traditions, which may be understandable. It's understandable to borrow terms in the very beginning of when a culture is transplanted to a new culture. You have to have some kinds of connections made. Perfectly understandable. Use terms like soul and God and nymphs and all of that, borrowed from Greco-Christian traditions, but that no more, my friends. Now we need to now we Westerners need to step up and expand our vocabularies, just as in the colonial period we expected other cultures to adopt our vernaculars, English vernaculars. Enough. We're not in the colonial period anymore. Okay, it's our turn to step out of our little boxes, our little Western boxes, and start expanding our repertoires, which you've already done. There's lots of words like karma and samsaras, right? We need to now, especially those of us doing svādhyāyas like this, it is now our dharma to expand our vocabulary and semantic repertoires and start becoming familiar with terms that do not have translations. Understandable in the beginning, no one's criticizing. 1920s, 1930s, 1960s, that's fine. No more. Okay? So these are beings that are, you might just say it once, you might say they're like angels, okay? Then you establish a category, but then take it from there and identify each of these celestial beings in their own terms. So now, so the sages and the demigods of these celestial beings. Again, if I was to write this again, I'm not sure I would even use the term demigods, because it's coming from, anyway, you get the point. Okay, the sages and demigods, overflowing with happiness, showered flowers. So it's kind of like confetti at marriages. I mean, you kind of do have to sometimes give examples from the traditions we're familiar with. But still, we need to sort of, focus more now on introducing these categories in their own terms. So just as in, let's say, Catholic marriages anyway, when the bride and the groom come out from the church, everybody throws confetti on them. So now Krishna's coming, and the demigods from the celestial realms, they get balcony seats. They're in the celestial realms, and they perceive, and they're throwing flowers as Krishna enters into the universe. So at midnight, oh wait, and the clouds rumble gently, resonating with the ocean. So here, nature again. You got the birds and the bees doing their sort of harmonics. Maybe they're like sopranos, and you've got now the clouds in the ocean doing their perhaps more. They're more like the bass line, right? And so you've got this beautiful harmony, cacophony of sounds, not chaotic, all carefully orchestrated according to whatever they're putting together, some kind of a raga, auspicious raga, with the clouds rumbling as the bass line. Well, the ocean would be the deep bass, and then the bees and the birds and all other aspects of nature, everything offering their best, the breeze with the jasmine scents, and all aspects of nature are producing the best possible welcome, prakritic welcome, available to them according to their natures. They're offering that to Bhagavan. And I'll keep saying it doesn't matter how many times. That's bhakti. It doesn't matter what we are or what we have to offer. Bhakti is we offer our best, nothing other than that. Therefore, no one is disqualified. However, whatever meager resources we have, however appalling, appalling our voices may sound, or whatever, we offer the best we can. And that's what Bhagavan's looking for, our intention, our sincerity. Well, actually, Bhagavan's looking for us to give everything. Bhagavan's looking to not what we give, what we don't give. What we don't give, what we're keeping for ourselves. So bhakti is we give everything. You'll be a little ant, and you're giving everything. You know the story of, the beautiful story of Hanuman and the squirrel, and the beautiful story brings tears to your eyes. So Sri Ram, is heading over to Lanka to save Sita from Ravana, and the monkeys are building their bridge. The big monkeys are throwing huge boulders in, and the ocean is a service of the ocean is to keep them upright, right? That's instead of sinking, the ocean is doing its bit. Massive, great big ocean, rocks are being thrown in. There's a little tiny squirrel that's throwing in little pebbles, and he's there, right there with the big monkeys, the boys, right? Little squirrel, and Hanuman, is a great boxer, and he sort of shoos the squirrel away. Says, "Look, you're going to get squished. Come on, don't your pedals, your little pedals. You're not going to get Ram over the Sri Lanka." And Ram chastised him. He chastised him. He says, "He's doing more than you. Yata Shakti is a word in Sanskrit. Yata Shakti, according to your Shakti. According to his Shakti, he's doing more than you." And there's a beautiful story. And I think part of it is then Sri Ram strokes him, and that's how the squirrel gets his 3 lines on his back. But that's bhakti. It's not what you give, it's what we don't give. And the little squirrel was giving everything. So Krishna is now manifesting in the universe and all aspects of creation. Remember, nothing is inanimate. I mean, there's the inanimate part of Prakriti, to be sure, but there are animate beings behind in the ocean. That's Varuna, and the sun, that's Surya or Vivishvan, and the stars and the Chandras, the moon, and the nakshatras are the stars, and Vayu is the wind, and all of these. And then there's minor demigods that we probably mention in less known texts. There's minor beings associated with minor aspects of nature. There's loads and loads of Sanskrit texts, and some of them are going to have all these lists of things and beings and so forth. Everybody is welcoming Bhagavan. So at midnight, when deep darkness had fallen, Janardana Krishna was born. Vishnu, who dwells in the heart of everyone, according to Vaishnava theology, Vishnu is not the Atman. In Advaita Vedanta, Vishnu, Atman, same thing, although they wouldn't quite frame it like that. But in Vaishnavism, there are two entities. There's the dominant Atman, that's you and I, and then there's Vishnu, Antaryami, accompanying that Atman, a bit like a guardian angel, I suppose. No, not quite like that. Again, be careful. But just as in Christianity, you have this other presence in some, I don't know where that comes from. It doesn't come from the gospel. So at some point it popped up into Christian belief systems. It's not in the, if you, for me, if I was, if you're going to be a Christian, focus on the four testaments, because who knows where all this other stuff comes from. But anyway, then the notion of a guardian angel is not the same, but this idea that there's some divine presence that is with us in life. Well, in the Indian traditions, there is a form of Vishnu that accompanies us birth after birth after birth, sometimes called the Paramatma, sometimes called the Antaryamin. And Ramanuja actually makes a lot of, focuses on that quite a bit. So that's what it means when it says he dwells in the heart of everyone. Don't confuse Vishnu with the Atman. Vaishnavism there's an eternal distinction between God and the soul. So much Advaita Vedanta has been exported to the West that those who are, Vaishnava or Shaivas, Shaiva Siddhantas have to constantly stress this. There's a distinction eternally. Distinction in the Vaishnava theology. So that Vishnu who dwells in the heart of everyone appeared in Devaki, who resembled a goddess, like the full moon appearing in the eastern direction. Now, just like you have it's very interesting that this motif of Immaculate Conception is present in Christianity. It's present in Krishnaism. It's present in the birth of the Buddha, and probably elsewhere. I just happen to know those three. And obviously, the message being triggered is we are generated by sexual activity of the parents, and then according to karma, a particular soul enters the semen of that particular father. At least in Hinduism, that's how its conception is understood. So karmically, an Atman is thrust into a particular semen, or there's four kinds of births. There's a semen, there's egg, there's plant, and I can't remember, right? So four different kinds. So one is the semen transmission. So that a particular Atman comes into one of those four transmissional forms, and then injected into the womb, and that's how birth takes place. But you want to signal that's not how God is not under those conditions, not under that karmic way of doing things. So therefore, it's a mental transmission from the mind of, at least in the Bhāgavatam, it says he entered the mind of Vasudeva and was transmitted into the mind of Joseph. Not Joseph, the mind of Devaki. And you find the same thing in the nativity story, right? Mary was pregnant, but not by Joseph, by the Holy Spirit. And the Buddha, the mother of the Buddha, Queen, forget her name, had a dream that there was an elephant with four tusks that gouged her in the side, and she became pregnant. So, so the idea of Immaculate Conception is that clearly whoever's manifesting is not under the control of the forces of nature. You could then ask, well, why bother coming that way at all then? Why not just sort of pop out the sky and land on Earth? And probably I'm not sure I've seen an answer to that in the commentaries. Remember, if you're studying a tradition, if a traditional mode of studying is if you have a question, you go into the commentaries. In the Bhagavatam, we got 100 commentaries, so good luck with that. It would take you a week to answer any question. But I haven't done that, and I've never heard any sound buzz about that. So if you do not find an answer in the commentaries, then you're allowed to propose an explanation, as long as you make it clear. Well, here's one possibility, and as long as your explanation fits within the theology of whatever school you are interpreting. So you have to offer. You can't bring in science because it's not part of the, so let's say, Bhagavatam study, or you can't bring in Buddhism. So you have to bring in, your answer has to fit within the contours of whatever the school is that you're representing. You can say, okay, well, the commentators don't have anything to say, but we can propose, we could maybe speculate. Let's say we're doing something on Sankhya, that within Sankhya would permit this explanation. So in this case, Bhakti would permit this explanation, that why does Krishna enter the womb at all? Why bother going through that normal process, pregnancy, which is the mundane process of begetting a child? Why would God have to do that? Then an answer could be, that would be theologically appropriate, to give pleasure to his mother, because she's carrying him in his womb. And it said she was just in bliss. Normally, childbirth is a laborious process, right? Your stomach is stretched out. I mean, obviously, us men can only infer what it's like, and sort of here you remember the three ways of knowing is experience, and then the second is inference, and the third is hearing. So we would infer what it must be like to have your stomach stretched, but you also hear from your partner what she's going through. So, but anyway, in this case, Devaki was just in ecstasy because pure Brahman, pure Satchit and Brahman is in her womb. Not only is it not discomfort, she was just in bliss. And it says she's walked around like the full moon. Full moon. Um, and I
Edwin, it's 1 hour and 1 minute now.
Okay. So we'll do this. Okay, my friends, so on we go with our story. So Vasudeva, right, that's the father of Krishna. Krishna is Vasudeva, and the father is Vasudeva. I never remember who I teach what. There's so much. I probably said this, but when you're the son or daughter of someone, you elongate the first vowel of the parent. Okay, so um, so if I'm Edwin, my child would be Aidwin. That's how you get Vaishnava from Vishnu, right? So if you're the follower of someone or a descendant of someone, you elongate the first vowel. There's various ways of doing it, but one thing you do is elongate the first vowel, right? So Vasudeva is the father. Don't get confused. Vasudeva is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Vasudevaya is Krishna, in case you get confused. So here it's Vasudevaya, so that's the father, short vowel. He saw that amazing lotus-eyed child, his four arms wielding the weapons of the conch, club, lotus, and discus. These are the four weapons of Vishnu when he comes into the Prakriti. Usually he often comes to kill demons. So he has two weapons for the demons, the club and the discus, and two for the devotees, the conch and the lotus. He has various little things that are specific to him. He bore the mark of Srivatsa, which is a tuft of hair on the chest. Why? Well, why not? You don't ask why questions about Krishna or Vishnu. It's like saying, why is he blue? Well, he's blue because he wants to be blue, and so forth, right? That's a question. You're trying to find some causal explanation for that which is causeless. So Krishna gets to just be as he wishes to be, as does Devi and Shiva. And so there's infinite forms, and all of them have unique little, otherwise they wouldn't be distinct. They'd be clones, and they're not clones. They're all infinite presences. Bhagavan will take the form that appeals to your heart, my friends. And the Kaustuba jewel was radiant on his neck. So look at any picture of Krishna, you'll see that, if it's Vishnu, he's going to have these four things in his arm. You look carefully at his neck, you'll see there's a jewel there, always. If any of you have a picture of Krishna or Vishnu on your walls, if the artist is doing his job, his dharma properly, he'll be following these descriptions, and there'll be a jewel at Krishna's neck. Have a look next time you see some pop art. Always clad, he's radiant, clad in a yellow garment. No other color, always Vishnu, Krishna, yellow, sorry. He appeared beautiful as a dark rain cloud. Very interesting, my friends. Krishna is black, black, black. Krishna means black. Shama means black. Rain clouds are black. And he becomes Caucasianized, beginning in the colonial period. I've mentioned this to you before. It's really interesting. This is reverse racism, or I don't know if it's reverse racism. You go to the Brooklyn Museum, I had a student do this. And I told you before, I never know who I tell what. Doesn't matter. And she looked at the Brooklyn Museum as probably the best, total best collection of Northwestern Christian art, Krishna art, because most of it's perishable and doesn't go much before the 1700s. So 1700s, right? Okay, first missionaries come in the 16th century, but down in Kerala and places, right? So at this point, you have early travelers. You have travelogues. We're going back to the 1300s, that we still have travelogues, adventurers. Some of us might have been adventurers. Those of us that hitchhiked to India's would be the kind of characters back then that would have wondered about Anyway, so then you have British East India Trading Company, right? Whenever that starts, probably 1700s, okay? And then it's a private company. And then on into the right, and then that takes over big chunks of India, and it becomes so powerful eventually. It becomes the crown steps in, and it gets absorbed into the British Empire, right? So you've got 1700, 1800, 1900s, and she looked at the pictures of Krishna in the Brooklyn Museum, and in the 1700s he's black. And then late 1700s, a little bit light black. 1800s, he starts to become dark blue. 1850s, he's like light blue, but much lighter blue. Right now, the sort of colonial period, and people look up to, some people anyway, look up to the colonial power. 1900s, he starts being very light blue. Now you go to today, go to Vrindavan, look at the papa, he's white with a little bit of blue mascara. How about that? For not man made in the image of God, but God made in the image of man. He's black, my friends. He's dark as a rain cloud. Next time there's a rain cloud, have a look at the sky and say, okay, what color is that then? And that's Krishna's color. All over the text. And here it is. Right? Beautiful as a dark, not even a light rain cloud. A dark rain cloud. And that one of his names is Ganashama. Shama is black. The very word Krishna means black. It doesn't mean blue. It doesn't mean dark blue. Krishna, the word, look in the Sanskrit dictionary. Look in Moni Williams. It will say Krishna, a name of a Hindu god, right? Back when they wrote the dictionary, 100 years ago, it would be a Hindu god. They had no idea of the theology, no idea of the Vaishnavism, a Hindu god or a mythological god. Anyway, so it'll say that, and then keep going down the list, then it'll say black. The first time we see the word Krishna is in the Rig Veda. It's nothing to do with our Krishna. It means black. It's an adjective meaning black. So that's what Krishna means. And here we see why. He's as dark as a rain cloud. He was resplendent with a magnificent belt. So when you look at Krishna art, you'll see the artist actually has all of this. Pay attention next time if you care to, as long as it's not like some modern fusion artist. But if it's anything that, trying to be a little bit traditional, it'll have all of these ingredients. Arm and wrist bracelets. His profuse locks were encircled with a lustrous helmet and earrings made of valuable Vidura gems. So you have to have all of these ingredients. So in that sense, the traditional paintings of all the deities are following these templates, but within that you can be a little bit creative. So it says he wears a helmet. You get to sort of fiddle about and create a helmet that's pleasing to you, but it has to be a helmet. So you have a little bit of freedom of expression within the given template. And where's the template given? In the Bhāgavata Purāṇa and these Puranic texts for Shiva and Devi and everyone else. Upon seeing his son Hari, Vasudeva, the father, short A, was overwhelmed by the auspicious occasion of Krishna's incarnation. His eyes were wide with amazement. Overcome with joy, he bestowed 10,000 cows on the Brahmanas. Okay? Now here's the question. This one happens to be answered in the commentary. So the question is, you can imagine someone saying to the teacher, well, Guruji, how could he give 10,000 cows? He's jailed. He's in jail. The father's been jailed by the evil king. That's a legitimate question. So these kinds of questions get answered in the commentaries, but obviously not all of them. We have questions that come from our modern way of thinking that you're not going to find in the commentaries, and that's why we have to give our best speculation. As long as we're clear, it's a speculation. Again, remember the rules. First of all, you go to the commentaries, don't find it there, then you're allowed to give a possible explanation. As long as you're clear, it's only a possible, but that has to fit into the contours of the theology of whatever text you're doing that for. So in this case, we do go in the commentaries and we do find an answer, and the answer is, well, he's in jail, so he bestows 10,000 cows mentally. That's a rational explanation. Okay, and it works. So in his mind, right, he can't actually give 10,000 cows, and plus, who would have 10,000 cows? Imagine the chaos of 10,000 cows. But he's giving 10,000 cows in charity at the birth of his son. Okay. Vasudeva understood that this was a supreme being illuminating the birth chamber with his radiance. So Parikshit, remember the whole story. Parikshit's fasting for 7 days. He knows when he's going to die. He wants to fill his mind in with he's asked, what do you do with your mind at the moment of death? So Shuka says, well, you hear about the stories of Vishnu. So this whole Bhagavatam was supposed to have taken 7 days and nights to recite. So that's why every so often you hear, O Parikshit, because this is Shuka reciting the whole Bhagavatam to Parikshit. So he could understand that this was Narayana, O Parikshit, descendant of... okay, I keep doing this. Descendant of... He's going to say the Pandavas. Descendant of Brahma. Parikshit, descendant of Brahma. Well, I guess we're all descended from Brahma then, in that sense, because Brahma creates all of the forms of the universe at the very, very beginning. But normally it will be, Parikshit, descendant of, the Pandus, or the Pandus, or it's not like something like that. Realizing his majesty, Krishna's father Vasudeva's fear was dispelled. He praised Krishna with body bowed, hands joined in supplication, right? That he's doing Pranjalir, right? Pranjalir Anatusmi, and concentrated mind. So, we get rid of this there. Vasudeva said, It is clear that you are Bhagavan, God himself, the supreme being beyond the material world. Krishna is not a prakritic. He doesn't enter into Prakriti and take a prakritic body. He's not like Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, at least according to Nicene, theology, they took them 400 years to work it out. But by Nicaea, Christ is God made flesh. No. Krishna's pure Brahman enters into the world. Frequently the text will say his body is gunatita, not made from the gunas. It's Satchidananda Brahman. Okay, so it's not like it's not like how theologians think about Christ, because it's important in Christian theology that Christ actually becomes flesh, so he suffers, and in order to absolve the sins of the world, right? Which is an idea that Hindus find very strange, but just like those not familiar with Hinduism find Hindu ideas very strange. But sometimes it's useful to think about how strange Christian ideas might be if you're not familiar with the theology. And one way of doing that is looking at some of the Hindu pundits trying to understand Christianity. It's fascinating. They can make no sense of it. Why on earth would God have to be crucified? What? That's so weird. He said, if God wants to forgive the sins of the world, he'll just forgive it. Why does he have to come in the flesh and get nailed? And they found it incomprehensible. So something's very useful. And the reason for this is when we struggle to understand Hinduism, or when we read the accounts of, especially earlier accounts before political correctness, of the sort of representing Hinduism as mythological and primitive or whatever, it's sometimes very interesting to step out of our boxes and have a little look at how Christianity appears to those who have no knowledge of the centuries of theology surrounding it. They find it absurd that God needs to be crucified. He says, oh, when our Bhagavan comes, he's not crucified, he kills the bad guys. Nothing. He said, well, that's ridiculous that God would be crucified, number one. And number two, why on earth would humans inherit the karma of Adam and Eve? What kind of justice is that? Adam and Eve did something, and where does that karma get sort of plastered on every living creature since then? That's very unjust, and that's ridiculous. There's no cause and effect then. So so a person to read if you're interested in this. And he was so fed up. Dayananda Saraswati, Dayananda, 18th century, big sannyasi. He was a warrior turned sannyas. So fed up with the missionaries criticizing, belittling, ridiculing Hindu beliefs, he turned the tables. He said, fine, let's have a little look at your Old Testament then. Your genocidal God, your Yahweh, slaughters Canaanites, tramples men, women, and children. And let's have a little look at your belief then. And it's fascinating to, if anyone's interested on that, I've just finished a book called In Defense of the God with Form, and I have a little section on Dayananda, and it's fascinating to see what a Hindu, and he's not out to attack Christianity, he's just fed up with missionaries. And he says, okay, let's just see how you feel when we have a little look at what you think. You're saying we're irrational with our beliefs, and Ganesh with an elephant-headed God, and you say we're irrational. Let's have a rational look at your scriptures. And he picks out all of these things, which we take for granted. I went to a Catholic school. I went to a Catholic boarding school. We had a Latin mass every day. You never think about it. But when you see it from the lens of somebody outside, it's such an eye-opener. So anyway, Dayananda Saraswati is the place to go for really good exposure to what Christianity looks like from somebody on the outside who is not, again, he's not out to sort of just attack like the missionaries were, because he's not out to convert. Missionaries were. If you're going to convert, you have to ridicule the indigenous religion. How else are you going to convert? You have to show the natives that their religion is inferior. So you're going to pick on whatever you think is the most ridiculous or irrational, and you're going to say, look what you believe in. Well, we Christians, we have this rational religion. And Dayananda says, oh yeah? Is that what you think? Let's have a little look then at what you consider to be rational. And he picks out all of these passages. And when you put them together, you're like, oh, blimey, yeah. That's that's a little bit hard to call some of that rational. Okay, my friends, back we go to. So we understood, okay? It is clear that you are Bhagavan, God himself, the supreme being beyond the material world, okay? So this is what you call Saguna Brahman, Brahman with qualities. Guna, when you use guna for Brahman, by the way, let's be clear about that. Guna just means qualities. So we think of the three gunas, those are prakritic qualities, sattva, rajas, tamas. But the guna just means qualities. You can use the guna for Brahman. What are the gunas of Brahman? What are the qualities of Brahman? Satchidananda. So don't be confused when you hear a term like sa guna. Sa means with. So saguna Brahman is Brahman with qualities. Don't be thinking about Prakriti's qualities. Prakriti's qualities are achit, non-conscious, and they're sattva, rajas, and tamas. But Brahman has qualities, certainly in Vaishnavism, and Satchidananda, and in the realms of Vishnu, there's form and qualities and all of that, all made of pure consciousness. So don't be confused by the term Saguna Brahman, which you encounter in Bhakti. That means God with form. And that guna has nothing to do with Prakritic guna. Just remember, guna only means qualities. It doesn't necessarily mean only Prakritic qualities, because Brahman too has qualities. And the difference is one is chit, one is achit. Prakriti's qualities non-conscious, dead, inert matter, stuffness. But Brahman is always everything. The minute you use the term Brahman, it's conscious because it's chit. Sat chit ananda. So whenever you say saguna Brahman, you're not talking about inanimate qualities. So form, Brahman form, is not Brahman in a Prakritic form. No, the form itself is consciousness. So, in verse 13, you are the knower of the minds of everyone. Here it is. Your form is pure bliss and majesty. Ananda. His form is made of Satchit Ananda. And by the way, the term Satchit Ananda is quite late. It's post Shankara. The term in the Upanishads is Satyam Jnanam. That Brahman is Satyam Jnanam Ananta, not Ananda. So when did the term Satchidananda emerge? It emerged in Vedanta, not in the older texts. They talk about Brahman as Jnanam, which means consciousness in the older day, in the older text. Sometimes Jnana means, in Sankhya, Jnana means buddhi, but not in Vedanta. Jnana means consciousness. I don't want to get into this, but these are, so therefore Brahman is known as consciousness, and so here it's, I don't want to, we don't have time for all of that, but here, this is the point. Your form is made of pure bliss and majesty, but it's Brahman. It's okay, not made of Prakriti, not made of the three material gunas. So therefore, no karma. If Krishna was subject to karma, he would have a Prakritic body. Karma is a rule that only operates in Prakriti, and karma creates the Prakritic forms. Every form in the universe is there because of karma. Everything. The stone that's been lying in the ground for 10 billion years is there because of karma, and someday it's going to have some relevance to someone's karma. There is no other reason for the subatomic particles of creation coming together other than karma, the law that brings them together, right? Big Bang theorists, Big Bang, they don't know what are the laws. There's a Big Bang, and then there's the emergence of hydrogen and helium, and then these things called forces, right? That nobody knows what a force, they only know what forces do. You have these forces emerge, and then the various elements and the gravity and magnetic and strong nuclear something's keeping the whatever it is, the electrons spinning around the neutrons, and they just call it the electrode, whatever. They come up with names to explain forces. Nobody knows what the forces are, why there was a big bang, or nothing. You just explain it. Right. The Indian tradition, everything is what it is because of karma. Those atoms come together because of karma. They form whatever compounds they form, and they end up manifesting the universe that we know. Everything is the overriding cause of all of that, not the cause of all causes. The secondary cause is karma. Cause of all causes is Bhagavan. You can be a cause, but have your own cause. So milk is the cause of yogurt, but milk isn't the cause of all causes. The cow causes the milk. So you go down the causal chain, but eventually you have to come to a stop sign. When you come to that stop sign, it's called the cause of all causes. Because otherwise you could have a cause that causes something, but it's not the ultimate cause. So milk is the cause of yogurt, but milk isn't an ultimate cause. It has its own cause, and that has its own cause. So where's the stop sign? And of course, in Vaishnavism and any theism, that stop sign is God. So the cause, but not the ultimate cause, of why the atoms come together in the way they do, the subatomic particles, and whatever it is, physicist says 13.8 billion years, Purāṇa 13.8, 13 point, and the Purāṇa says 8 billion, so they're not, at least they're talking about billions. The cause of that coming together of the way they do, is karma. So karma is it's like gravity and electromagnetism. I mean, it's a material law. There's nothing ooey spiritual about karma. It's actually a material law. And I think the closest the science could possibly get to karma would be mathematics, and saying there are mathematical principles rather than randomness. If they get to a place, right now it's kind of more random, right? Again, I'm not a physicist, please correct me. But if they get to a place, I think like Pythagoras, whoever it was, there's mathematics behind the combination of subatomic particles and forces. If they get to a place where, look, it's so mathematical that there must be this law of mathematics, just like gravity is a law. We don't know what it is. It just does stuff. It keeps planets in from just dropping down, right? So there's some force, and let's call it gravity, right? Probably from some Greek term, right? So they could come to a place where they're talking about something that will sound quite like karma if they start saying there's mathematical principles behind all of this. Science could very easily reach that place if it hasn't already, and that would be starting to overlap with the law of karma, which is mathematical in everything, cause and effect. The type of mathematics, equal and opposite. That's a kind of a mathematics. I don't know if it's mathematics, but it's kind of a cause effect principle. If that's not mathematics, no, that's not quite mathematics, but it's something that the human mind can comprehend. Let's just say that. I don't see why science could get to a place pretty close to karma. Okay? So, but Bhagavan's not under any of that. Okay. It was you who in the beginning created this world, comprising the three guna qualities out of your own nature. So the Prakriti is a Shakti. It's a Shakti. I don't know if you're interested in philosophy, because we're reading Krishna Lila, but you notice even in Krishna Lila, the Bhagavatam doesn't inject it does inject jnana every so often. So jnana is always supporting bhakti. So there is one Vaishnava theologian who is not happy with the idea that Prakriti emanates from God. Because he would say, well, Prakriti is imperfect, and if Prakriti is a Shakti of God and emanates from God, then imperfection is emanating from God. And that Vaishnava is called Madhva, and he has a school of Vaishnavism, and he would say there's an eternal distinction between God and his Shakti, that he doesn't want God to be affected with any imperfection at all. And so most of the Vaishnavas would say the world, like Ramanuja, is somehow an extension, a Shakti, a power manifesting from God. This Vaishnava is uncomfortable with this. You know, I mean, he's the Vaishnava, he shares everything else. But within Vaishnavism, there are 5 main lineages. And one of them is much more of a dualist. No, the world is totally separate from God and may be supported by God, but it doesn't emanate from God, because then evil or imperfection will be emanating from God. You get his point, and he has a valid point, and one may agree or disagree, but one can understand where he's coming from. That's Madhvacharya, great Vaishnava theologian, that the Gaudiya tradition, as Krishna Chandra knows, claims connection to Madhvacharya. Right now, so you've created this world. You in the beginning created this world. See, comprising the 3 qualities out of your own nature. Even though Madhava wrote a commentary here, we could look at his commentary here. He'd probably interpret that a little bit different, that nature is not actually coming out of God. So periodically, my friends, the Bhagavatam is a bhakti text, but it has a lot of jnana, and everything I just said is jnana. But there'll be other stories that will be pure bhakti, which is where ultimately Krishna devotees want to end up. We want to end up in a place beyond jnana, but we need jnana to get there. We want to enter into a place of pure, trans-rational, playful, loving exchanges with God, beyond any notions of philosophy and cause and effect and rationalism. We want to end up there, but we got a bit of work to do first. We got to have the little tapas, and jnana is kind of a little bit tapas, can be tapas sometimes, but all the great bhaktas, not all of them, no, all the great teachers did their jnana. But you don't have to do jnana to be a bhakta. Some of the great bhaktas were illiterate. And if you really want beautiful bhakti poetry, you read Surdas and these wonderful Krishna bhaktas, and they're not theologians, and they don't know nothing about Vedanta, and they've never heard of Madhvacharya and his position on creation, and they just talk about little Lala Gopal stealing butter and delightful. So Surdas, my friends, for those of you that really want to, avoid jnana. But remember, we're given intelligence. It's part of our equipment to reach God. We have to go beyond it, but we need the intelligence to get us to the point, and then we go beyond it. Because if you abandon intelligence and you take a leap, be careful. You may end up in a place of fanaticism. You may end up in a fanaticism where you don't want to use your intelligence. You may end up in just a concoction from your own mind. So I would say the safest path is follow the Bhagavatam, use the intelligence, and go work your way through the 9 chapters using your buddhi. And even the beginning of even in the 10th book, there's jnana every so often popped in, just so we don't become stupid and make up nonsense stories. But at a certain point, we take that leap into the beautiful realm of Krishna Lila, and we leave our jnana at the door. Just like you leave your shoes at the door of the temple. And when you go out, you pick them back up again. So we will get to that place. We will jump into the delightful trans-rational world of jnana. But let's do it. Well, let's make sure our jnana knows what it's doing when it takes that leap. And that's the buddhi. And that's the work of the first 9 chapters right now. So, a bit of jnana here. Now there's going to be a pretty dense jnana section, just 3 or 4 verses. It was you in the beginning who created this world, comprising the 3 guna qualities out of your own nature. Then, although not actually entering into it, you nonetheless make it seem that you've entered into it. How can you enter into your own nature? You are your own nature. So you're not really entering into anything. It's you. This whole Prakritic world is an extension of you. So you're not entering into it, but it seems like you are. From our point of view here, trapped in our little bodies, in our little, wherever we are, Krishna seems to be entering into the universe. But actually, everything's him. So how is he entering into anything? It's just an extension of himself. And he gives us an example. It's a bit, I'm not sure it's the greatest example, but let's read it. This is like these material elements. Okay, think of the subatomic particles. Well, let's just go with atoms, electrons, newtons, right? Let's just say atoms. Although full of potency, they do not produce form when existing separately, yet when they combine and interact together, they produce the manifold world with all its forms. They appear to enter this world, but actually is not the case since they existed beforehand. Right, so we look at reality and we think it's made of atoms, or we know it's made of subatomic, muons, gluons, strings, whatever. Let's just stick with atoms. We know the world is made of atoms, and it appears the atoms make the world, but actually atoms existed before, right? Even Big Bang theory, you get the bang, and then you get, what is it? Hydrogen comes first, and then helium, and so on. So the atoms existed before, and then they combine. And it looks like the world is made of atoms, but really atoms existed before. So it looks like Krishna's entering the world, but actually existed before. I don't think it's a great analogy, and I don't mean to disrespect the Bhāgavatam, but I never found it helpful. But we're reading it, and there it is. In the same way, you exist along with the gunas. Okay, so in other words, Prakriti is actually eternal. The universe isn't. It dissolves back into Prakriti and then it re-emerges, and that's what we've heard of cyclical creativity, that the creation is cyclical in Hinduism, but it's not that the gunas are eternal. They're just a Shakti, and between creative cycles, they just rest in kind of a latent state. So you exist along with the gunas. Now these can be perceivable by their characteristics, which are recognizable by the intelligence. You can perceive what the gunas. So in nature, fire is rajas, metal is tamas. So you can look at material objects and say, okay, that's got a lot of tamas in it. Or the air has more sattva in it. So the intelligence can go around looking at things in the universe and say, that's got more fire element. And in the mind, the intelligence can say, someone's very rajasic, they have a lot of desire, they're always running around, they're always ambitious, they can never sit still, they've always got something to do, places to go. So you can say that person is primarily rajasic. You can look at another person, is inactive, lazy, procrastination, always, sleepy, or eating junk food, always kind of like doesn't really, inactive, no ambition. You can perceive the characteristics of tamas, and you can perceive the characteristics of sattva, detachment, contentment, kindness to all beings, because you see all beings equally, and you see all beings equally by your own self. So therefore you empathize meaning you put yourself in that place of others, and from that comes empathy, and that comes compassion. Compassion comes from empathy. Empathy comes from putting yourself in other, and that's what Krishna says, that the same Atman is there in the body of Brahmano Hastino api Shunyeva Shapaketa Pandita Somadarshanaha. The Pandit sees everybody equally. The elephant, right? Isn't that in the story? Peter, the elephant, the dog eater, Pandita Somadarshanaha. So that you might want to put that with that Pishaka Brahmana. He didn't have this Pandita Somadarshanaha. He didn't like the Chandalas and the low caste, so he didn't have this Somadarshanaha, which is the very definition of the Pandit in the 2nd chapter. So, these are the characteristics that the intelligence can see. That's what the verse is saying. The verse is saying that these gunas can be perceived by their characteristics. Guna means a quality, and we can distinguish one quality from another by these sorts of things, which are recognizable by the intelligence. If you studied a little Sankhya, your intelligence has absorbed a little Sankhya, you can perceive these characteristics. You, however, says Vasudeva to this newborn son Krishna, who he realizes is not really his son but God, you, however, cannot be perceived by these gunas due to being concealed. So Bhagavan is transcendent. So therefore we can never understand Bhagavan through our minds of themselves are made of the gunas. So when we think of Krishna being blue, why do we think he's blue? Because the text tells us he's blue. Your mind could never rationally say, look, this is what your mind can do. It can do. Your rational mind can say, God, there must be a God. Why? Because the universe is so, it's statistically ridiculously impossible that that subatomic particles post Big Bang bumped into each other due to these things called forces, which we don't even know what they are. Things started whizzing around other things, and we call them, weak nuclear, strong. It's statistically impossible that all of that haphazardly, with no guidance, happens, and we end up with this world, but a boom. So your intelligence can say your intelligence can say there must be some intelligence that did that. That's as far as your intelligence can take you. Your intelligence can say nothing more. You don't know if that's one intelligence beyond that put it all together. You don't know if there's 10 intelligence. You don't know if he's a demon. Like one of the early Christians who didn't like the God of the Old Testament. He was called Marcion. You read the Old Testament, God is a nasty piece of work. He didn't like that. He said, well, there's two gods. There's the demon God of the Old Testament and Jesus Christ, who's the loving God. So you could say that with your intelligence. There's no way of denying that. So you don't know what that God is. God has to reveal himself. To say that God is blue and plays a flute, there's nothing rational about that whatsoever. That's totally trans-rational, and that information is only true or false based on revelation, which is what the Bhagavatam presents itself as being. So therefore, that's the verse is saying. What's the verse saying? He's saying you can look at the gunas and understand, well, this is rajas, that's tamas, this is both in physical prakriti and in psychological prakriti, but you, however, cannot be perceived by these gunas due to being concealed. Okay? The only way you're going to know that Krishna's blue or Shiva has snakes around his neck is if that being tells you and manifests. And then you have to decide whether you want to believe it or not. No other access. You cannot go further than saying there must be intelligence. That's it. Like my dad, a great man. There'd be sitting there 40 years chanting Hare Krishna. At the end of the day, I said, Dad, what do you think? He said, well, I don't know. There must be something. There must be British, right? There must be something, lad, he would say. I don't know what it is, but there must be something. So that's as far as you can go with your intelligence. He didn't want to make that leap of faith. Why should he? So, okay. So you cannot be perceived by these gunas due to being concealed, right? Right. There is no inside and outside of you. Think about this. Why are they saying that? All of a sudden they're sticking this in, as if they suddenly change the subject. 1 minute you're talking about gunas. Why does he say, right? Everything is there for a reason. Whoever put the Bhagavatam together, whether you believe it's Veda Vyasa, whoever you want, is a brilliant, first of all, scholar of all the Indian knowledge systems. Everything is there. Mimamsa, Vedanta. He's an incredible poet when he gets to the 10th book. whoever put the Bhagavan together, of course, the tradition says it's Vyas, who's a partial incarnation of Narayana, partial, not full. Whoever he is, he's not just randomly putting stuff in. I mean, you write an undergraduate paper, and you write it, your sentences have to flow. You can't just suddenly put a sentence next to another sentence that has no connection. Do that, and you write, hey, how did you bridge that? Why do you suddenly talk about this when you're talking about that? Bad writing. So if something's put in, there's a reason for it. So there is no inside and outside of you. Think it through. We have an Atman inside, an external body-mind mechanism, a set of instruments. We have a physical body, and then we have a mental, a chitta, antakarana, subtle body, and we have the Atman inside. Krishna's not like that. He's not some special soul in this cool body that does cool things. No, Krishna and body are one and the same thing. Krishna is his body. No inside and outside. In these 5 words, there's no inside and outside of you. 6 words is immensely important theologically, because Krishna's not a soul in a body as we are, my friends. He is his body. Is everybody clear about that? He doesn't leave his body and go back to his divine realm. The entire body goes. Because why does the entire body go? Because Krishna is body. His Atman, his body is his Atman. No inside and outside. Think carefully about that. Because it's central to Vaishnava understandings of Bhagavan. You are the universal soul of everything, and the essence of the soul. Our own Atmans are simply little sparks of Satchidananda, sparks of the supreme Brahman, Sagun Brahman. Remember, Brahman in Vaishnavism, always Sagun. It's always the form. It's not that Brahman is higher than the form. In Vaishnavism, the form is the highest. Krishna's form is the highest expression of Brahman. One who considers the external... right, let's skip. Okay, let's see what his mom says. Let's have a little look at Mataji. His mother Devaki. She's his real mother, by the way. Yashoda. Krishna gets carried over to the river, to Vrindavan, and he gets placed. Yashoda has just given birth to Durga in the form of a little girl, and they switch the babies. So Krishna's real mother is Devaki, but Yashoda doesn't know any of this, and she thinks Krishna is her real son. If some of you know part of the story. Okay. We'll do a little bit more, and we're almost at the 2-hour mark, and we'll take some questions. But let's just see what his mom says. That form which they call Brahman. Who's they? Vedantans, the Upanishads. So that form, it's a form. It's unmanifest, right? It's not made of Prakriti. Everything in Prakriti is manifest. The 3 gunas come together, they intermingle at the beginning of creation, and they manifest. You've seen the Sankhya charts in the back of your Yoga Sutra books. First comes Buddhi, then Ahankara, then all these 25 elements. They evolve and they manifest in that way, right? So Brahman is unmanifest. Everything is eternal. So when does anything manifest? Things can only manifest when there's temporality, right? There's creation and then things manifest. And then in Indian tradition, they manifest and then they dissolve, and then there's a next cycle and a next cycle. But nothing manifests in Brahman, because if something's eternal, there's no manifestation. It's always been there. So unmanifest. You see, notice how every single word, when we study it properly, is important. It's communicating. It's giving us information about God, which is the 10th book of the Bhāgavatam. The other 9 books are preparing us, remember. So it's original. It didn't come from something. This world came from the gunas. It's original. The light, is a metaphor for consciousness and the pure consciousness is, the Sufis, so many poetic traditions, when they try to describe it, the nearest thing we have is luminosity. That's the most common cliche material analogy of pure spirit, pure Brahman, the light. But is it really devoid of the gunas? It's not matter. Gunas are matter. Unchanging. Gunas are always changing. Krishna's leelas, the realms of God are eternal. They're never changing. And his actions are never changing. So there's movement within, there's change within non-change, another oxymoron. Because Krishna is, walking, talking, doing all right. So you can say that's change. But there's change within changelessness. It's pure being. That's the word for sat. It's undifferentiated. Why is it undifferentiated? Because everything is Brahman. It's devoid of activity in the sense of prakritic activity. There's activity in Brahman. It's not the same category of activity. So she sounds like a Vedantin here, which is a bit unusual because, anyway. You are Vishnu himself, the light of the self. When through the force of time the universe is destroyed. So we have a big jnana section here as the parents, and notice the difference between them and Krishna in Vrindavan. Nobody knows who he is because they're all covered by Yoga Maya. And maybe we'll stop here, my friends, because I don't know whether you're interested in this kind of jnana. And the next time we read a Krishna story, there'll be less jnana. This is more jnana now because he's just entered the universe, right? We just come out of 9 books with a lot of jnana, and now Krishna's manifesting, and the author's still concerned that we don't misunderstand who he is. He's Brahman, he's beyond the gunas, so there's still this jnana, right? But then once he's born, and okay, the author's going to say, okay, I've done as much jnana as I can. Now let's go for the Leela. Now let's enter into Krishna's beautiful, transcendent, devotional. Now let's enter the realm of pure love. And then the jnana starts to get minimized as we work, as we enter into the 32 books of the early part of Krishna's Leela. My friends, we can take some questions or comments for 10 minutes if we wish. Okay, so next time, next time, you know what? We'll do another story next week, and then we'll go back to our 9 books. But we'll do. I want you to see some real Leela stories. There's not much Leela here. There's just kind of God entering, and then there's all this kind of like, because the author wants to connect Krishna with Vedanta, with Brahman, with that which is beyond the gunas. He still wants to connect Krishna with the world of jnana in this chapter 3. But we'll jump then, and then we'll jump to where the author feels, okay, I've done as much as I can to really make it clear who Krishna is. Now let's enter into the internal world of love of God. What does love of God look like? We all talk about love of God. What does that look like in Krishna Bhakti? Okay, so this is a little bit of a transitional chapter, and we meet again next time, and we'll go to the transrational world of Bhakti. But occasionally there'll still be little bits of jnana dropped in just to remind us, wait a minute, this is God. Don't think this little child crawling around is some mental construct. Rhonda.
Hi, Edwin.
Hi.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to mention that as far as we talked about the last time we had class where some of the footnote numbers were different, in this section, they're exactly the same as the book.
Okay.
And so that little faux pas in that one section. We don't know exactly why, but I just wanted to let you know it doesn't run through the whole thing.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. That was helpful. Thank you. Anybody else want to say anything or push back or have anything to say? Or otherwise we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Again, I'm going to do the best I can to keep this going, but please know that it's a huge transitional period for me. The next, even 4 or 5 months, and you just have to bear with me. Massive change of everything, and I also have to, undergo. I have, get out of this professorial asmita, confront a few kleshas that I need to confront that I've been ignoring, that are now demand attention, and do a little personal work, and deepen my sadhana. When you're an academic, and especially I've had two lives. I've had the academic life and this whole workshop life. In the old days, every weekend I would fly before COVID. Every weekend I was flying to some studio. So that's all consuming, and I need to do some personal uh work, as we all do, but sometimes, when you step out of one box, you can't make excuses anymore, and you really got to confront. So you bear with me for the next 5 or 6 months, and we'll try to keep it going, and there'll be some changes of dates, but for me, Bhagavatam is my lifeline. Without this, I cannot imagine getting old. Of course, but I cannot imagine. This is my lifeline in the literal sense of something to cling on to in the ocean of samsara. And I'm so happy that many of you are interested in sharing it. Okay, so you have a great weekend. And remember what we always do at the end. We go Jai 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 Sri Radhe Shyam.